As many of us know, standardized tests are used to compare and determine progress throughout one's education, and in certain scenarios are the basis to apply for higher education. Although this has been a trend in society for a while to use and give so much credit to these exams, there are negative side effects and other alternatives that will provide much more for everyone involved. The culture and negative effects of these exams in society can easily be changed with the proper steps taken. Today, I will explain and discuss the negative effects and social issues regarding standardized testing and ways in which this can be bypassed in an effective manner. Since standardized testing has been a part of most people's lives involved in the education system, many people don't give it much thought or look into the fine lines of what it actually represents. Nobody seems to really talk about these tests in an advocating way, so it falls into the back burners of our minds. However, there are some things that you should recognize when it comes to these exams. With that in mind, these tests are in general cater to a wealthier community, limit the scope of learning and overall retention of subjects, creates mass amounts of stress for students, and one exam score does not show a student's true potential and growth throughout the years. According to a 2019 article by Lincoln Aftergood, a news reporter for Lionsdale, standardized tests are a major cause of stress in high school students across the whole country. Students spend hours and hours of time preparing for a test that they believe decides their future, when they could be spending that time living life in a less stressful way, learning useful information. This is just one of the negative effects of these examinations for our students in our education system. All of the unnecessary stress can have a lasting effects on students who may resent learning and not want to continue further education. There is also social inequality when it comes to the scores of these standardized tests. This is because students with wealthier backgrounds tend to score higher on these exams because they can afford tutors and study programs to help them prepare for the exam. While it is great to be able to get help, people are taking these exams with all different backgrounds, causing there to be an unfair gap between scores. According to Lincoln Aftergood again, the news reporter in a 2019 article, this leads to inequality on the score sheets and an increased rate of wealthier students being accepted into colleges, even when they are not necessarily smarter than less affluent students. The last argument in standardized testing is that standardized tests do not measure the progress of a student and only measure how good of a test taker he or she is. Since there are so many factors that affect test taking, there are a lot of arguments saying that this examination is one that only shows who is best at preparing for the exam and not what knowledge the student actually knows. With all this evidence and reasoning against standardized testing, Brendan Bustede, Executive Director, Education and Workforce Development, at the time of the quote, stated, "Despite an increased focus on standardized testing, U.S. results in international comparisons show that we have made no significant improvement over the past 20 years, according to the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA. With all of this, it is only right to ask the question, is all this testing, standardized testing, lowering our ability to actually comprehend and learn new material at an efficient rate? I think so. With the thought of barriers in mind, there are many different reasons why standardized tests are not thrown away and removed completely from our education system. Standardized testing is required by federal law in most states in math, English language arts, and science. Although some states allow the option to opt out of these exams, that is only the case in a handful of states. Therefore, it is federally required that states must be involved in these standardized examinations during their youth. Although it is not required to take the SAT and ACT, it is one of the main factors that colleges and grad schools look at when determining admission to a student. Therefore, it gives you little to no option but to conform to that system if you want to continue your higher education. These tests are still being used because they are perceived by many to act as a good gauge on a student's across the country and their learning abilities and knowledge retention. However, as I will explain in my plan and solvency section, I do not think standardized testing should be completely abandoned. Rather, it can be adjusted to fit the needs of everyone and test the actual knowledge in a less radical way. Also, the option to opt out of these state exams should be given to everybody in every state and not just a handful. Instead of standardized testing, students should have tests created by teachers with the goal of learning more about the student's abilities and interests, said by Mina Nagandi, math coordinator at a French-American academy in New Jersey City, New Jersey. This is already an existing idea that should be implemented because it is looking out for the same interests as those who encourage standardized testing. However, it does so in a much more just and fair way to reach out to all in a more forgiving option. Also, since these tests are made up by state, you should be able to opt out of these tests. By creating a more reformed ways of standardized testing that benefits the students and having the ability to opt out of these exams, students will be able to focus on the curriculum and enjoy the material which they are learning, rather than just cramming and memorizing material needed to get a good grade. Society will overall be in a better place with the proper adjustments of these exams. And in the end, with all the evidence that shows how these exams can be harmful and not very useful for actual progression in a student's education, it is important to gain knowledge on the situation so that we can create a more just system for our youth in education.